Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, a crossover show with Brian Kamenetzky of the Locked On Lakers podcast, looking at this rivalry and why the two teams might have more in common than you realize. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers and Locked On Suns your first listen of every. How does that work, Brendon? You just press play at the same time? I mean, are we just going to assume that it's your first and second listen of today?
Well, this episode's the first listen, right? And then from there, where do they go? We'll see. But in this case, it really is. You're listening to both shows. That's how these work.
At the same time. No, that's very helpful. Make sure to check out Locked On Lakers and Locked On Suns on YouTube. You can be part of those communities. Leave questions, leave comments. I am going to go out on a limb and assume the situation, the landscape at Locked On Suns is similar to ours, where we could use your input right now. It is that time of year. If you have questions, I can guarantee you they will get answered on the show. Do want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So one of the reasons I was hoping we could do this, Brendon, people from the Locked On Lakers, a reminder, Brendon Kleen, host of Locked On Suns, joining us. I find the parallels between the Suns and the Lakers to be kind of fascinating. When you look at where both of these teams are in the Western Conference, when you look at some of the skepticism around them, when you look at their investments in expensive, older players who can still be very good. But I mean, did you watch the Olympics with one hand over, like your hands over your eyes, hoping KD didn't get hurt? I mean,
there was a shot he made in the Serbia game on the right wing where somebody sprawled out into his legs. I think he got a foul but didn't make the shot. And I said on social media, the season just flashed before my eyes. So yes, we're in lockstep on that.
Yeah. So I mean, it was exciting. It was great to see. Everybody seemed to get through it okay. And Davis, Durant, LeBron, all huge parts of this gold medal effort. But you said it, like the Suns and the Lakers are both highly dependent on very brittle, I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it, potentially brittle players. I'm not even just talking about KD with the Suns, but throw Bradley Beal in there and
sure,
a bunch of other guys. So, I mean, do you see a lot of these things? Both teams, fresh coaches. Neither team is trash. Both teams are still kind of locked in, though, with their rosters and could only do so much this offseason. Do you see some of the same basic parallels here?
I definitely do. Personally, the blueprint that I use when I'm talking about the Suns, specifically from the standpoint of the salary cap, has been the Bucks, just because they are actually over the second apron and have these, again, kind of, the Suns are unique in their way because they have three max, super max stars when no one else in the league is even thinking of doing that anymore. So they're kind of one and the same. But the Bucks are another one, right, where Giannis and Dame are making a lot of money. They're both a little older. They're both dealing with injuries the past few years. The team is a little stuck in terms of what it is really able to do. But I think the Lakers are perfectly valid, and almost the Lakers seem to be thinking of that second apron as a no-go area, to the point where they're almost using it as a hard cap for themselves, it seems like, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I almost think of maybe this offseason was when the Suns started to try to split away from that, where they are a little deeper now. They have some trade options. We'll see if they're able to actually pull the trigger and utilize those trade routes, but they have them in a way they didn't before. And they really spent this summer actually drafting players, actually signing those extension contracts and those second deals with the same player, and not just doing the biggest, the most at all times to maybe try to pull away from some of the whether it's the Bucks or the Lakers or whatever the comparison points you would use. So I think the Suns might hope they're not quite as stuck or dependent on health as they were last year, but that might just be wishful thinking. I think they're very much, counting on health and counting on the big three to be great, just like they kind of have to every year.
I look at the Lakers and they are in this interesting space where, like, LeBron talked about it, JJ Redick has talked about it, where they are clearly not good enough to be one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the West. And before we're done here, maybe we'll sort of just talk about the West and where you think kind of these teams tier up. But I think it's fair to say the Lakers, as currently constructed, are not going to be as good as Minnesota. They're not going to be as good as, if you still put Denver in that upper tier, if you put Oklahoma City, obviously, they're not that good. They are also not bad. They had a bunch of significant injuries last year, and because they didn't have tons and tons of depth, people look at AD and LeBron playing a bunch of games and be like, what do you mean they had injuries? Well, Jared Vanderbilt was hurt all year, Gabe Vincent was hurt all year, and Rui Hachimura was kind of in and out of the lineup, and Reeves started the season really poorly because of the FIBA fatigue and all that stuff, and they just didn't have enough depth to really overcome that stuff. And so when you combine that with Darvin Ham, who was not particularly well regarded, they still won 47 games. So you can look at this team and say, things break a little bit better with better coaching and a little bit better health. They're over 50 wins. That's not bad. But it's a weird spot to be in the Western Conference, because to be an elite team, you should be capable of winning 56, 57, 58, 59, because that's how good Oklahoma City is, for example, I think, even if they don't quite hit that number for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think I see the Suns similarly, at least looking back on last season, right? Because, the FanDuel over-unders came out, I think it was last week, and I'm sure a lot of us covered that on our shows, and the Suns are at 46, 47.5, depending on kind of where you look. And that feels incredibly low to me. And not, I try to put the homer hat off and not have the Suns' point of view too etched into my mind. But they won 49 last year. And they had a season from hell from a health standpoint and a coaching standpoint and a lot of other things. So I think that there is a lot of overlap there. I think the one thing, I guess if I'm putting that homer hat back on as I'm literally wearing a D-backs hat here, that I would say the Suns might think they have an advantage with there is their 3 best players didn't even really fit together great. And obviously there's a world where they just flat out don't fit well at all. But I think that their hope would be, hey, they each had individual moments and maybe some games that clicked. Booker is second-team All-NBA. KD's second-team All-NBA. Beal played like 55 games. What happens if all 3 of them can play, 60-plus games at the very least and actually look good together? There's another level to be reached. And, I'm sure the Lakers could make a similar argument of just, hey, well, yeah, our 2 guys fit. They won a title together, but they got to have something else around them that is working. Otherwise, it kind of doesn't matter how well they fit. So, yeah, I think both teams didn't really see the full realization of what they could have been last year and still were pretty solid. So, yeah, I think to me, they're 2 teams that I would think most people would pick to stay where they were or go up in the West this year versus other teams that might be coming down.
Well, I mean, it's funny. You talk about the over-unders, and we absolutely did a show on that last week, was that, the Lakers were 43.5. I mean, that to me felt extremely low. But then again, if you pushed it up to 47 or 48, I don't think I'd go that high. I mean, it is hard to trust. And I think, what's really interesting to me is the models for both of these teams. You talked about Phoenix sort of trying to pull away from the Lakers, clearly not trying to go over that second apron, but they're also, I think, they're fighting the urge to go with a third star, to find that third person or whatever, and trying to figure out with limited trade capital, with limited draft capital, what exactly they could bring in. So I want to talk a little bit just sort of philosophically about whether or not you think these teams like the Lakers and Suns, can succeed with the paths that they're currently fairly well locked into. We'll do that next.
First, today's show brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. The example I always give in Phoenix, a sun flap for the interior of your car, something you would never think you would ever need, but when it falls off, you certainly realize just how badly you need it. eBay Motors had me covered there. You also have superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, anything you need, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Thanks again for making Locked On Lakers and Locked On Suns your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There is no offseason in the NBA, which is why we are still working in the middle of August. And Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts like us in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained as Locked On NBA. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The hard part about getting yourself kind of locked into something from a roster standpoint is figuring out what you do to get out of it. And, the Lakers did something really dumb. I think we can all agree with the Russell Westbrook trade and have done nothing but try to undo the damage of that since it happened. They're working on it. They're sort of out of the hole, but not completely. Part of the reason they haven't been able to do anything this offseason is because of the roster choices they've had to make in the wake of that. And we will still be feeling the effects of this for a couple more seasons at least. But you're also kind of locked into something with LeBron and AD. There was some talk like, are the Lakers going to re-sign LeBron? Would you give him max money and all this? Yes, you have to, because if you let him go, what are you going to do? Then you send out AD, you still can't replace any of these guys. And you don't have the trade capital and all that stuff. So you kind of have to keep going the direction you're in. I get the impression, at least, that the Suns are in that spot. The owner seems somewhat insane, but also they've given nobody's trading for Bradley Beal.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, you could trade Devin Booker, but what's that going to do for you? And Kevin Durant is probably as complicated to trade as LeBron. So this is what you got, and you might as well lean into it. Is that? I mean, I that's how I read it with the Lakers. That's how I read it in the Suns, and it's a weird time to be locked into something like that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the only difference by the Lakers not being in that second apron territory is they're not legally bound by the rules that the CBA puts on you, so they can, for instance, combine salaries in a trade, or they can take back more money than they send out, even if they obviously don't want to go quite as high as, these other teams. But other than that, it's functionally very similar. And I think the Suns, the moniker, the kind of catchphrase that they ended up, putting on themselves in a Brian Windhorst article last summer when they did the Beal trade is they're blowing through the second apron. That was what Matt Ishbia, who you're correct is a little crazy, said to Windhorst after that deal. And that's kind of
third apron, you guys would be blowing through it.
Probably. But look, I mean, the thing, the kind of secret of all of it is that they did the KD trade 2 months before the CBA was finalized. And maybe you could say a more savvy veteran owner would have, gone through the grapevine and tried to figure out what might have been coming, but this guy did not. And so they did get blindsided by it a little bit. And at that point, it's kind of like, okay, well, even with Booker and Durant, they were bound to be I haven't done all the math because it's impossible with all the who else would have been on the roster kind of stuff, but they would have been an incredibly expensive team with just those two guys. So you look at it, and at that point you had Chris Paul expiring and all this stuff, and it's like you kind of get to this point where you got to keep rolling over the assets and rolling over the money. Otherwise, I know you guys talked about this a lot with D'Angelo Russell. It's like, what else are you really going to do, even if it's not perfect as it stands? So they looked at it and they said, Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, a guy that no one's even thinking of anymore. Let's combine those and go get Bradley Beal. We'll send a bunch of pick swaps out the door. Who cares? It's a pick swap. We're already all in. And yeah, you could pick nits. Is it the absolute best third player you would have put next to Booker and Durant? No, I mean, probably not. But it's an all-NBA caliber guy who has clear talent and was at a stage of his career where he was ready to leave the Wizards and try to win games. And that was the best they could do. So they have to just kind of keep maximizing whatever that next move is going to be at this point. And I think the last point I would make is the advantage they got by kind of going first. One, they got to make a few different moves before different segments of the CBA actually clicked into place, which was nice. But they also now had this summer, when a lot of other teams are just starting to confront the realities of this second apron, the Suns were like, all right, we kind of you pick your fate when you have huge salaries on your books, and then from there it's just kind of incremental differences until you really click with chemistry and the right role players and everything else.
Yeah, it's how do you guys look at management? Because I think part of the frustration in LA is with the way that the team is run. And to some degree, I mean, nobody's going to ever accuse Ishbia of being cheap. I don't think that's a problem. That is a problem with the Lakers. And it's some of it is like, Matt Ishbia could buy the Buss family 12 times over if he wanted to, including, the price of the team.
Now we have that with the Arizona Cardinals out here. It is
right.
The team is the family business. That is how some of that works. Yeah.
And so but it is the insularity of the front office. It is a tiny operation. You see the war room and there's like nobody in it on draft day. It's like 5 people, including the guy, like the Postmates guy who brought the food over and all that stuff. Everybody is connected to the organization in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So I think part of the skepticism around the Lakers is built around the way that the team is managed. When you look at not just the Suns, but the Lakers are, the Buss family can't spend with Ishbia, with Steve Ballmer, with all these other, but the rules are sort of set up to mitigate those impacts to some degree. And it's not like the brand is still pretty valuable and, they still spend plenty of money. How much of a difference maker do you think those things are going to be in terms of just the 15%, the 10%, the 20%, whatever it is, that's going to come from all the ancillary stuff, the quality of your staff, the quality of your development program and all these other things? Because that to me is where the Lakers are really lagging behind and where money can mean more than even with your roster.
I agree completely. And I mean, the Suns are not far removed from that exact same existence, right? I mean, Robert Sarver was even cheaper than the Busses when he ran this team, and I think that they're still just starting to drag themselves out of how deep that really ran, and the draft room, and this is a team that and I guess to give Sarver a bit of credit, some of these changes were happening before he was unceremoniously ousted. They practiced in the basement of their arena. The team like staff offices were upstairs in the arena. They had no scouting department really to speak of. They had no statistical, analytics department to speak of. And it was just turnover and no leadership and I'm not, again, there's going to be intricacies between the Lakers and the Suns. I'm not throwing that on you guys, but it was bad here. And so Ishbia is definitely helping. just by spending money, that goes a long way, having people in positions that there weren't before. But I would say that we're still in the learning phase of exactly if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. I always, in the NBA, I always think of Mark Cuban. It wasn't always great. And I think the best thing you could say about his involvement and over-involvement is, again, he tended to spend and pursue talent and try to win, which is great. But a big part of, I think, what his legacy seems like it's going to shape up to be in Dallas is that the last few years he let go and he let everybody else do the work, and they made the finals again, and he kind of like learned his lessons. So even when you're the finding every inch type of owner, that's not always pure and good. And Ishbia is doing a lot of that. He's hiring his own guys. People from the mortgage company he owns are around in the Suns building. And, there's people who were from his basketball world at Michigan State 25 years ago who have been in actual hired roles at the mortgage company. It's very weird and kind of combined right now. And he's pretty much undone this whole front office. So it's great. We're in the honeymoon phase. You have great talent on your roster and you're spending money. Nobody's going to complain, but there's going to be that next phase and the phase after that where you got to be smart and you got to do it right. And we'll see if he can nail that stuff.
It's funny because this is a rut that the Lakers have been in for a long time. And it's not that, Jeannie Buss is not a meddling owner. If anything, she's almost too far in the other direction where she stays out of decisions to the point of not holding people accountable enough. They hold coaches accountable. They get rid of coaches quickly and frequently of late, including our mutual friend Frank Vogel. I do have to ask you what the hell happened there. I feel bad for Frank, and not so bad because he's being paid by like two teams and has plenty of money, but like it doesn't seem like either of the last couple coaching seasons for him have been particularly good or fair. But anyway, Jeannie's problem is that, Rob Pelinka, Andy and I always joke, like has a really, really hard job that I don't envy, except for the fact that he can't get fired. It's like, it doesn't matter really how badly he does it. What he's being tasked to do is really hard. And the Lakers don't have a lot of stuff at their disposal to fix the problem, which is partially Rob's fault. But he just doesn't seem to be in a position where he's ever going to be fired. And that's Jeannie's problem. So it's just, I don't really know how the Lakers get out of the situation that they're in, which is this weird NBA limbo of too good to be, dismissed and good enough that you can always look at them and say, man, like if they catch a couple breaks and, you flip D'Angelo Russell or Rui Hachimura for like the right guy at the deadline, I'm not sure I'd want to play them in the playoffs. Maybe they don't win a title, but they could certainly advance a couple rounds. And I mean, anybody who watched the Olympics is still going to be frightened of Kevin Durant. So as a fan, it'd almost be easier if they were awesome or were just terrible. You would know.
It's funny though, because you talking through that reminds me of the other two, prestige teams that we kind of put the Lakers in the class of the Cowboys and the Yankees. And I think you would kind of place each of them right in that same sweet spot, right? Where it's like they haven't won. The Lakers won 4 years ago. The Yankees and Cowboys haven't won in a long time, but maybe I'm just making that story up and being an outsider and trying to, throw you guys in a category you don't belong in. But I do think that sometimes that stuff can happen in sports where it's like the fear of getting to be awful because of the prestige that you have, but then also the fear of actually ever swinging for the fences and taking a really big risk. You know what I mean? And
totally,
it's a tough spot to be in.
It's and I know there will be some complaints. Why are we talking about the Suns? This, I mean, the value of these things, I think, is we do a show every single day. I'm sure you feel the same thing. It's like you get so hyper focused on your team and your team every day, and what is happening with your group, and it's like Facebook. You look out and you feel like everything is better out there. And then you turn around and these holding up a mirror to another franchise, particularly when I think like the Suns, that's in a similar space. can be instructive to learn about your own group. Let's talk about the rest of the West, because it's been a busy summer for most teams, just not ours. We'll talk about where these the Suns and Lakers stack up next. So, Brendon, who if you had to pick like the three teams at the top of the conference, who would you put there?
The way I've been looking at it is I don't think that there's any clear-cut number one that's going to just dominate everybody else. We didn't have that this past season. I don't think we'll have it this season. I would put the Thunder at the top of a pretty large top tier in the West, and you can debate kind of who maybe belongs in it, but I would look at the entire top six from last season, which was OKC, Denver, Minnesota, Dallas, and the Suns. And I'm thinking all five out. Clippers, let's put them away. They lost Paul George and didn't really replace him, so they're not going to be there. But I think the other five of those teams all belong kind of in that group. I could hear arguments for others, but right now I kind of think that'll stay the same. I think the Suns are at the bottom of it. I think the Thunder are at the top of it. Just in terms of the regular season, maybe championship equity is a little different. And then I think it's kind of everybody else is in another big tier too. I just think it's a lot of jumble right now. And I would say the Lakers and the Pelicans and the Grizzlies, frankly, are all in that second tier, and then probably rounding it out with the Kings and the Warriors. But that's sort of how I see it. I don't think anyone really separated themselves, but there will be a lot of very good teams again, would be my guess.
See, I think I'm not totally bought into the idea that the Nuggets are going to fall off a cliff. I think losing KCP Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. We use the shorthand here in LA. having I think
everyone. You get a couple championships, you get there. Yeah.
But losing KCP, I think, hurts for them, and they're going to be reliant on players that they haven't been reliant on before, and all that. But they still got a phenomenal starting lineup. Honestly, I'm a little suspicious of Jamal Murray. I think that is
bad Olympics,
very bad Olympics, and didn't have a great regular season last year. Yeah. Wasn't great in the playoffs, except against the Lakers at really inopportune times. Yeah. And shaky physically and all that stuff. And so Jokic can only do so much for them, and Michael Porter and those guys. But I think Oklahoma City is, both because of their youth and because of their talent, actually is going to run away with the conference. I think maybe Minnesota hangs with them. They got to do it 2 years in a row, and I'm still a little suspicious of their setup there. But they did some nice things in the offseason. But I think Oklahoma City is the only team in the conference that I think has the potential to legit run away with the group. They're going to be so hard to score against.
They're going to be impossible to score against. They fixed their major weaknesses. I definitely have them at the top of it. The two holes that I would poke in the Thunder, and they're tiny holes that might just make it the difference between them running away with it, like you're saying, and just kind of being there, like I'm saying, is just they were really healthy last year. Yeah, they're young. That helps being healthy. But at some point, maybe that flips a little bit. And even if Guy missed 20 games, that does a lot if it's one of your top players. And the other thing is, their three-point shooting is, it felt a little bit fluky. I don't know if it actually is. They hired the guy from the Spurs who's supposed to be the best shot doctor ever and everything else. A lot of their players are just low-volume three-point shooters. And we saw in the playoffs that they got guarded in such a way that especially Dallas just looked at it and said, yeah, we don't buy it. And we're not going to guard you like you're a great three-point shooting team. And they couldn't really answer for that. So I don't know if that really crops up on a random, night in January. But, if that comes down to earth again, just a touch, maybe they're not quite as good of a regular season team. But yeah, I mean, they're deep, they're great, they're going to be awesome on defense. They have a legit MVP candidate. It's a great team.
And so the reason I mentioned those two is I think I'm kind of like you. I think after them, I'm still going to need to see, for example, that Denver's not elite in the same way that they've been elite. I like Memphis actually a lot. Yeah, but they have, when you have that whole year when you're not competitive, you've got new players to plug in. They are certainly thin up front if in terms of bigs and stuff like that, but they just have a lot of talent. After those two teams, Minnesota and Oklahoma City, you can make an argument that knocks down basically everyone. You can make an argument against Denver. You can make an argument certainly against the Clippers. You can say that Dallas kind of caught lightning in a bottle after the trade deadline, and we'll see if they can do that over the course of an entire season. I mean, look, the Lakers made a similar kind of run that the Mavericks made after the deadline last, 2 years ago now, made it to the Western Conference Finals. And certainly we're not able to replicate that the year following. The Suns have some of the problems we talked about. The Pelicans are the Pelicans, Kings are the Kings. That makes it even harder, I think, for the Lakers and the Suns to make honest evaluations about where you are, what the right move is, you'll know better than me, obviously, what constitutes pushing in whatever else you have. For the Lakers, it's those last couple draft picks, it's D'Angelo Russell, maybe it's Dalton Knecht, maybe it's Austin Reeves. Like those, you only get one shot at it, and so you're not going to do that for Jeremy Grant, but maybe a player comes along. I mean, it's so wide open. There are a lot of really, 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 really good teams, but only a couple, I think, dominant teams in the West.
Yeah, that's what the league wants, right? This exact dynamic is, I think, what the league is really liking about the past few seasons, and it makes for a different kind of a trade deadline. I think we've seen where there's simultaneously not like as many fully all-in moves, but there are a lot of small moves because everybody thinks that they're in it. So I think that the Suns are, the way that they operated this summer by getting a little deeper, like I said, they brought not one but 2 point guards in Tyus Jones and Monte Morris in a position that they clearly thought that they needed some help with. They added a better backup center after an awful year of that last year, and they just got vets instead of last year where they ended up with a bunch of young guys filling out their roster. So I think they have this roster now where they're going to be able to make a move if one comes along and it won't decimate them the way that it would have last year. And they have some different types of players to mix and match and experiment with between those point guards. They have some forward options that they didn't really go into last season with. Bol broke through as a real rotation guy. Royce O'Neal, they added at the deadline. They can mix and match with that. Maybe a little more, hey, can we play small with Kevin Durant? Is that even possible for us? Are we too undersized when we do have a point guard, even though that's what we thought we needed? And they'll just use the beginning of the year to evaluate it. And I think I've been saying since they kind of made their final move by that Tyus Jones signing is it's all great, good marks for the offseason, mission accomplished. This is not going to be what the roster looks like game one of the postseason. And I kind of think it can't because, for me, it might even be, a little ahead of myself to put them in the same tier as some of those other teams. I think they need a little more to get them closer to that. And they're in a crappy situation where, once again, they can't make trades that combine multiple players. So they even more, and they only have one pick. So they even more need to nail whatever that trade is going to be. Otherwise, they're really out of options and still not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, you sort of answered my next question, which was like, I look at the Lakers and I definitively believe that even if all things go well for them, short of a series of catastrophes befalling 3 or 4 teams across the league in a way that is just too unrealistic, the Lakers are not a title contender as constructed. I think if everything goes well for them this year, and assuming it's not a disaster for everyone else, they are a team that could win a round or 2 in the playoffs, but probably won't go further than that. They need one more move. Do you see that? Like, if everything goes well for the Suns, Beal's healthy, Booker's healthy, Durant is healthy, do they, the Tyus Jones works out, Budenholzer hits in a way that Frank didn't. Are they in the same place, or actually are they good enough to, knock on wood, compete as constructed?
Yeah, I mean, clearly their expectations for the season are to win a championship. And I don't think that they're, right now FanDuel has them as the 5th best odds. That feels, in the West, to win the title. That feels roughly right. They're behind OKC, Denver, Dallas, and Minnesota, who we're both in agreement are all ahead of them. But like Memphis is quite a ways behind that, and even the Lakers are 1,100 behind the Suns. So, yeah, I think they need another move to be a more coherent rotation, I guess I would say. They need more wing and forward depth. That's going to have to kind of be where they look on the market. Can you turn Nurkic and a pick into that? But again, I think a lot of their bet this year is, hey, when you assemble a big three, the biggest thing that's going to make it work is those guys clicking, fitting together. Right. They didn't last year. Can a new coach, better depth, a roster that makes more sense and more time, frankly, and hopefully better health, can that be the difference? And so it's almost an impossible thing to try to quantify because it's all just kind of, well, what if we tinker here and tinker there? Can that make all these other things a lot better? We'll see.
Last thing for you quick before we go is, and again, I ask because we talk about this a lot. I really am curious how other people perceive similar situations. New coach, Budenholzer replaces Frank Vogel. We talk all the time about how better coaching JJ Redick, hopefully from Darvin Ham, is probably worth 2 or 3 or 4, maybe more than that, wins over the course of the season. Do you guys look at it the same way? Like just a better coach, everything else stays the same, a better coach, you win 2, 3, 4 more games?
I think it will because of how clearly they thought about Bud and what he would do compared with the things that the team sucked at last year. And there were just these very obvious glaring problems that this team could not overcome that I think are a big part of why Frank Vogel got fired is their shot selection was awful. They played slow. They could not get their heads out of their you-know-whats in the fourth quarter. They were the worst fourth quarter team in the league to the point where their execution was so bad they're like 2-3 wins below expectation from their point differential and things like that because it was such a big problem. Right. They were the worst fourth quarter team by a mile. So, yeah, I think from that standpoint you would hope, hey, even before you thought of him as a Suns option, those are a lot of things Mike Budenholzer does. So, yeah, I think you would hope that overcomes those issues and he's a big difference maker. I don't know about 3-4 wins. Let's I guess fingers crossed, but 1 or 2, said, sure.
A lot in common with where the Lakers and Suns are as we get deeper into the offseason, creep our way towards the regular season. Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers and Locked On Suns first listen today. Go check out the Locked On NBA podcast where the season never ends, providing national expertise with local perspective. You can find the link to the Locked On NBA show in the description, so you don't need to search for it. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks again to Brendon Kleen, Locked On Suns, for joining us. I'm Brian Kamenetzky from Locked On Lakers. We'll see everybody next time. Thanks.